There's this this persistent idea that just seems to float around, doesn't it? This notion that life, and especially our own growth as leaders, that it all operates on these predictable, fixed timelines.
The 7-year idea keeps coming back.
It always comes back. The belief that something, fundamental shifts inside us, almost like clockwork, every 7 years.
It's a fascinating piece of, human myth-making, really. It has roots in everything from ancient philosophy to biology.
And it's so appealing.
Its staying power is all about its psychological use.
Yeah.
I mean, if you stop and think about why we're so drawn to it, it's obvious.
It offers structure.
It offers structure. It puts this clean, predictable grid on top of the messy, sometimes terrifying chaos of inner growth.
And that structure is such a comfort. We're always looking for language, aren't we, to explain these deep internal shifts.
Yeah.
Those moments where a life that felt perfectly fine yesterday suddenly feels like a suit that's 2 sizes too small.
And if you can just point to the calendar and say, okay, I'm just due for my 7-year reckoning, well, it gives you permission.
Permission to step into that change without feeling like you're just lost at sea.
Exactly. It validates that inner tremor. It gives you a way to acknowledge that a transformation is coming or that it's necessary. And that is incredibly valuable.
But that's also where the danger starts.
That's precisely it. The comfort of that fixed external structure, the metaphor, it can completely hide the fundamental experiential disconnect.
The disconnect being that when you actually look at a lived experience, when you look at the journey of a leader who's managed to sustain themselves for decades, their movement doesn't feel like a straight line at all. It's not this constant upward visible progress.
It's not. We are so culturally trained to see growth as an ascent, climbing a ladder where every step is forward and up.
And you never look back.
You never look back. But genuine, sustainable depth, it rarely happens that way. It requires a profound and often unsettling return.
Cycle. It returns.
Precisely. The very heart of sustainable development is returning to ground you were sure you'd already covered.
Revisiting questions you thought were settled.
And re-examining foundations you thought were rock solid. That is the paradox of return that really defines true inner leadership.
And for a high performer, that return is so hard. The internal story it creates, it can be brutal.
Oh, absolutely. Imagine a leader, someone deeply committed to self-work, and they suddenly find themselves wrestling with who they are, with their purpose.
Questions they thought they answered 5-6 years ago.
Right, and this wave of frustration just washes over them. I already did this work. I spent a year with a coach on this very thing. Why am I back here again?
Why do I feel so uncertain?
That framing, that feeling of being back again, that's the key point of friction. We have to be really clear that this return is not a failure.
It's not going backward.
It is not regression. That's just the immediate cultural judgment we put on ourselves. It's simply the necessary movement to go deeper.
So if the question is back,
it's because some part of the self or some new layer of your world wasn't fully seen or resolved in the last round.
So the previous solution was, what, a surface level fix?
It was effective enough for the previous context. It worked for the previous level of self-awareness. But it just doesn't have the depth, the capacity to handle the new complexity life is throwing at you now.
You nailed it.
Yeah.
Think about it like this. You solved the problem of your identity when you were a young professional, right? Your whole identity was about being competent, about being fast.
And now you're leading hundreds of people. The world is demanding wisdom, patience, ethical complexity. That original, simple solution is just too brittle for this new reality.
So it wasn't wrong, it was just...
It was shallow. And the return is life's way of forcing you to build out the psychological infrastructure you need to support who you are now.
I see that distinction all the time in the sources. The difference between feeling clear on a subject at one point and then years later feeling this deep, almost paralyzing uncertainty about the very same thing.
And if your only metric for progress is moving away from uncertainty,
then that return to doubt feels exactly like failure.
But if we can fundamentally redefine progress, if we move it away from a straight lineup and toward increasing depth,
toward understanding all the nuances and complexities we just ignored the first time around,
then uncertainty isn't the obstacle anymore. It actually becomes a prerequisite for deeper integration. This is the core work. Distinguishing depth from regression.
That takes a certain kind of courageous patience, though, to really trust that when you're revisiting a painful question, You're not just rewinding the tape.
You're not. You're seeing the same landscape, but from a higher vantage point this time. You're seeing the interconnected routes you couldn't possibly have perceived before when you were just rushing to get a simple answer.
And that trust is essential because the default, especially in high-pressure leadership roles, is to panic.
The moment that metaphor of linear progress breaks, you panic. The system demands constant forward motion, and anything less is judged, and judged harshly.
Okay, so let's really unpack this structural failure now. This is where it gets really interesting, I think. The problem with literal timelines and just how deeply they've infected our leadership culture.
Right. The problem really starts when that comforting metaphor, the 7-year cycle, or just the idea of fixed life stages.
When it's taken too literally.
Exactly. What starts as this sort of poetic way of thinking about change, it quickly hardens. It calcifies into this rigid, non-negotiable expectation for how a human being is supposed to develop.
And the moment a metaphor becomes an expectation, its whole function flips. It stops being a tool for reflection, and it becomes this huge source of inner pressure. The comfort of the structure is gone, and you're left with the crushing weight of a schedule you have to keep.
And that creates the trap of outgrowing. It's so insidious. People start measuring their real, authentic internal state against this arbitrary external clock.
A clock that society or maybe their professional group imposed on them?
Yes. And they ask themselves, why am I still struggling with simple team dynamics? Or why do I still get anxious about failure after all I've achieved?
They're fighting things they believe they should have outgrown by now.
They're using an internalized calendar as a weapon against themselves, and their messy, cyclical, real life fails to conform to this neat upward line, so they judge themselves for it.
And that self-judgment is just corrosive. The real struggle, the necessary internal work, it's not seen with compassion.
No, because the struggle itself is judged as being, well, behind schedule. The inner voice says, a mature leader wouldn't still be dealing with this, not at this stage of my career, not at my age.
And it creates this deep disconnect from any kind of self-compassion. It's all fueled by looking outside of yourself.
And this internal mistake is amplified, sometimes just violently, by the broader leadership culture we all live in.
Our culture doesn't just tolerate this idea of viewable linear progress.
Yeah.
It actively demands it. It celebrates it above everything else.
The whole architecture of a modern organization is built on it. Linear time, measurement. Think about the bias towards rigid timelines.
A quarterly review.
The 2-year promotion cycle, the 10-year strategic plan. We lionize the prodigy. The person who had the fastest, steepest climb from the mailroom to the CEO's office.
And the career ladder itself. The whole concept implies only upward motion. Once you're on a rung, you never look back.
You certainly don't step sideways to explore something nonlinear, and you definitely never step down or even just pause to ask if the ladder is leaning against the right building anymore.
And this cultural obsession, it just fuels this demand for constant momentum. Leaders feel they have to project this image of total certainty, unflagging progress.
Which means the stories we tell about leadership are all curated. The case studies, the biographies, they edit out all the messy cycles, the returns to doubt, the pauses, you just get the highlight reel.
Never the actual recursive process.
But the undeniable counterpoint is always there.
Yeah.
Human beings do not develop like spreadsheets. We don't update with neat quarterly version changes.
No, our development is organic. It's recursive. It's profoundly messy. It's much more like ecology than engineering.
Exactly. You have seasons of intense outward growth, and they're followed by these equally necessary, if frustrating, periods of dormancy, introspection.
And sometimes the most important work, the work that determines if the next cycle is even sustainable, is the one where you're underground.
Gathering resources.
Gathering psychological resources, restructuring things internally, just metabolizing the last big change. But on a company's P&L, that just looks like stagnation. It looks like nothing is happening.
And yet, it is absolutely essential for the depth you'll need to lead through the next round of complexity. So if we strip away the plenishing literal calendar, what's the real truth that these periodic ideas are pointing to?
It has to be something universal. Unavoidable.
They're pointing toward recurring, unavoidable themes in human development, in leadership development. The specific number 7, 8, 10, it's completely irrelevant. It's just a clumsy human attempt to impose order.
So the recurrence of the topic that matters.
That's it. The calendar is just a placeholder for a deep inner dialogue that life is going to force you into, sooner or later.
So when a tradition observes that people have big identity shifts around certain ages, It's not the age itself that's the mechanism.
No, not at all. It's just the culmination of pressure. By that time, the friction between the old, simple identity and the new, complex reality has become too great to ignore, so it forces a reckoning.
The internal pressure is turning the pages, not the calendar.
Yes. And that realization brings us to the core of this. We need to decode these recurring thematic cycles. If the calendar isn't the guide, then we have to understand the fundamental questions that keep reappearing.
There are 6 of them.
6 fundamental themes. And the crucial thing here is that they are totally unscheduled. They don't appear in order, they overlap, they cycle unpredictably. They're triggered by your own readiness or by what life throws at you.
Okay, so the heavy hitters. Questions of identity, questions of belonging, questions of courage and responsibility.
Then questions of meaning, questions of letting go, and finally, questions of contribution.
And their reappearance is what defines the depth of a leader. So let's dig into each one.
Let's start with identity. This is often framed as, a teenage question. Who am I?
Right.
But for a leader, this question comes back, and it comes back violently and repeatedly. Think of a founder who successfully scales their business.
And realizes their whole identity was wrapped up in being the one who fights the daily fires.
Their identity was the person who fixes things. Exactly. And then the company hits a new scale, and they have to hire professionals to run those functions. And that core identity just evaporates.
Now they have to be the person who enables others to fix things, or sets a vision.
And that transition from doer to enabler triggers an acute identity crisis. The old, reliable sense of self just doesn't apply anymore.
And the inability to navigate that cycle, that's what causes so many successful people to sabotage a perfectly good structure. They cling to the old roles.
Absolutely. Then you have the theme of belonging. This is so deeply tied to our human need for connection, for safety. For a leader, it often shows up in 2 ways: organizational misalignment and the loneliness of command.
That loneliness at the top is very real. As you rise, the distance between you and your team naturally grows. You have to hold information, make decisions that isolate you.
That isolation requires constant work. But the deeper crisis of belonging happens when the organization's purpose shifts. A leader might wake up one day and realize the core values that drew them in 10 years ago.
It's a pioneering innovation.
Right. And now they've been replaced by a focus on hyper-efficient commoditization. And you have to ask yourself, do I still belong here? Does this organization still feel like it belongs to me?
And if the answer is no, leading with any integrity becomes impossible.
The cycle demands a choice. Which leads to the next one: courage and responsibility. It's easy to feel courageous when things are going well, when the stakes are low.
This cycle returns when a leader has to make a call where the outcome is truly unknown.
And the cost of being wrong is catastrophic, and the failure would be completely public. This is when responsibility expands much, much faster than your capacity to hold it.
From leading a small team to a whole market to impacting geopolitical stability, the scope of what you're accountable for just explodes.
And the cycle comes back, forcing you to re-examine your personal bravery and your psychological capacity to hold that weight without breaking. The test isn't fighting a visible enemy. It's holding the ambiguity of a crisis as it unfolds.
That complexity leads us straight to meaning. This is probably the most famous crisis point for leaders who've checked every box on the linear ladder.
They have the title, the money, the influence, and then the existential question just knocks on the door. Was this it? Where is the deep, lasting significance in what I'm doing?
Meaning is the great rebel against the linear timeline, isn't it?
It is. Society suggests meaning is the prize you get at the end of a long, successful climb, but the sources all confirm it. The most profound crises of meaning happen right at the peak of external success.
The system failed to deliver what it promised.
So the leader is forced to cycle back, often dramatically, to redefine success. Not by what they can accumulate, but by a connection to an internal purpose.
And that flows perfectly into the next theme: letting go. This might be the most continuous and the most painful cycle of all.
It permeates every single major transition. It demands this continuous active surrender. Just think about the practicality.
They have to let go of old habits, like the need to be the smartest person in the room.
You have to let go of control when a team grows too big to micromanage. You have to let go of old beliefs, like the business model that worked perfectly 5 years ago but is now obsolete.
The biggest challenge in leadership isn't learning new things.
It's letting go of the old things that made you successful in the first place. That resistance, the founder who can't delegate, the CEO clinging to an old technology, is the single greatest predictor of organizational decay.
The cycle of letting go demands you continuously shed the skin of your past.
And finally, that brings us to contribution. Once identity is recalibrated, belonging is sorted out, courage has been tested, and meaning redefined, the focus inevitably shifts outward. It becomes generative.
How does all this accumulated experience serve the world? What lasting, positive legacy is being built?
And this question also cycles back as a leader's influence grows. The contribution required at a local community level is vastly different from what's demanded at a global systems level.
Right. Local contribution might be creating jobs. Global contribution might be tackling climate change or reshaping supply chain ethics.
And that difference forces a reevaluation. A leader might realize that their current way of contributing, while great on a local scale, is ethically inconsistent when you zoom out. The cycle returns, demanding greater resonance, greater consistency, greater long-term impact.
What's so vital about these 6 themes is that they don't follow a calendar. You don't just check them off a list.
No. They appear when you're ready or when life forces the timing. There's no waiting list for a meaning crisis. And an identity crisis can hit a CEO at 60 just as hard as a graduate at 22.
And that unpredictable timing has these profound negative effects on a leader's ability to adapt if they're still stuck in that linear model.
We see two very dangerous internal positions emerge when that cycle is denied.
The first danger: the moment a leader believes they have arrived.
Arrival implies you're done. Completion. If you believe you've finished the work, that you have the map and all the right answers.
Listening immediately becomes harder.
It becomes almost impossible. The external world can only offer you validation, not genuine, new, disruptive input. You stop hearing information and you start filtering everything based on what confirms your status as arrived.
Curiosity just fades away in the presence of presumed mastery.
And the second danger, which is just as destructive, is when the leader believes they're too late.
That too late feeling is devastating. It's born entirely out of that comparison trap, that linear delusion.
You judge yourself against that rigid external timeline and conclude you missed the window, missed the opportunity for that big career pivot or that crucial transformation.
And curiosity, which is the absolute lifeblood of sustainable leadership, it requires you to believe that future possibilities are still open.
If you think the game is over, why would you expend the energy to explore? Why seek out new learning if your internal dialogue is already convinced the opportunity has expired?
So the cyclical nature of growth, the fact that we return to these themes, it's actually a constant invitation to reset that clock.
It's a radical invitation to refuse both the narrative of arrival and the paralysis of too late.
So if control is impossible and time is cyclical, where do we even anchor ourselves? Well, what's the starting point for inner leadership?
Inner leadership truly begins not with a desire for control, but with sustained, radical attention.
That is a subtle but a monumental shift in orientation. We are so rigorously trained to believe leadership is about exerting control.
Over outcomes, over the market, over people.
But if the goal is sustainable growth, if it's well-being, the foundation has to be something else entirely.
Control is fundamentally about fixing and manipulating the future. Attention, on the other hand, is entirely about anchoring in the present reality.
So inner leadership doesn't start with having the right answers.
It starts with having the courage to stay present to the questions that life and your organization are asking you right now.
Which means having the maturity to sit in the ambiguity of those 6 themes. To say, yes, I am a seasoned executive and I am actively grappling with my identity again. And I don't have the answer today, but I refuse to panic about it.
That refusal to panic or judge the cycle, that quiet acceptance, is the precise mechanism of real integrated growth. It turns a crisis into a period of necessary deepening.
And what's fascinating is that this realization, this acceptance of the cyclical, nonlinear nature of our own development, it keeps showing up.
It keeps returning in conversations across wildly diverse cultures and leadership contexts. It doesn't matter what industry or what country.
So leaders in tech firms, in nonprofits, all arrive at the same quiet conclusion.
The internal landscape is tidal, not a mountain path. The sea comes in and out, and you have to attend to the tide, to the current reality, not to the artificial demands of a fixed calendar.
This universality really underscores that we're dealing with fundamental human psychology, not just management theory.
The cultural variations might change how a meaning crisis gets expressed, as burnout or a dramatic career shift, but the internal pressure of the crisis itself is inherent to the human experience of managing time and change.
So if attention is the anchor, how does that change the very definition of what we're trying to sustain in leadership? It has to be a shift, a fundamental shift to defining sustainable leadership as inner orientation over mere external performance.
That shift in emphasis is the only path to lasting influence, high integrity, and, critically, the leader's own well-being.
Conventional leadership is obsessed with speed and performance metrics. We worship quarterly efficiency, rapid results.
The mandate is always to do more faster and cheaper than last quarter.
And that model, doing more, it creates this endless, exhausting, and inherently unsustainable pressure. It assumes a leader can maintain a linear, ever-increasing energy output.
It treats the human being like an endlessly scalable machine, which we are not.
So sustainable leadership has to reject that premise entirely.
It has to recognize that the speed and performance model eventually burns out both the leader and the organization they're running. The emphasis must shift radically from external metrics to inner orientation.
An inner orientation
Yeah.
that implies a deep, continuous, sensitive calibration of yourself to your environment, to your current internal season.
It asks, am I attuned to reality? Am I aligned with my core values? Is my internal compass pointing toward integrity, even if that means slowing down visible progress?
It's not about doing more, it's about being more attuned.
Yes. Attunement is recognizing that you yourself are the instrument of perception and decision-making. And if that instrument, your judgment, your energy, your clarity is out of tune, then the external performance will suffer no matter how much effort you apply.
So attunement comes before effectiveness. It's the prerequisite.
It replaces sheer force. And this shift from seeking to control outcomes to offering attention to what's real, it fundamentally changes your day-to-day existence.
If I'm focused on control, my energy is spent pushing against reality, forcing things. That's high-friction energy.
But if you shift to attention, your energy is spent discerning what's ready to emerge, what the team is really saying, where the market tension truly is. It changes how you lead.
Instead of micromanaging the details to force an outcome.
You pay this deep, non-judgmental attention to the underlying context, the morale, the conflicting data, and you allow the system to adapt, to find its own organic path forward.
How does that play out in, say, corporate governance? A control-based decision is made to maximize an immediate short-term gain.
And it often ignores the externalities, the long-term structural weakness it's creating. An attention-based decision, by contrast, considers the long-term integrity and alignment with purpose.
So it might mean turning down a profitable deal.
If that deal fundamentally compromises the team's well-being or the company's stated values, it's often a slower, more deliberate process, but it's infinitely more robust against future shocks.
And crucially, this inner orientation is what allows a leader to stay human under crushing pressure.
Yes. If your identity is tied only to performance, then pressure is terrifying. Failure means your self-worth is erased.
But if your identity is tied to your inner orientation, your integrity, your presence, your commitment to learning, then pressure is just intense feedback.
And failure becomes valuable data. You stay grounded, reflective. You can treat a setback as part of a learning cycle, not as a final judgment on your worth.
Leadership is presence. That's the fundamental understanding we're driving at. It's not about being ahead of everyone else.
It's about being fully present with what is.
We're being present with what is. That means acknowledging the current season, the current ambiguity, the current thematic question knocking at your door.
It means dropping the comfort of past certainties and the delusion of future expectations, and just dealing squarely with the complex, ambiguous present.
That sustained presence, that ability to hold ambiguity, that's the defining characteristic of sustainable leadership.
It's what allows the cycle to be embraced as renewal instead of feared as regression.
Which brings us to the essential question, the one that determines integrity and shapes the leader's future. We have to address the question that those conventional linear timelines force upon us.
That limiting question, the one that causes so much unnecessary pain and comparison, is tragically simple. It's, where should I be by now?
It's a question just loaded with external judgment, with impossible expectations. It's a question that has to expire from a leader's inner dialogue.
It's utterly exhausting. It forces you to look backward and outward at the same time, comparing your messy internal reality against some imagined, perfect milestone that somebody else invented.
But once we dismiss that question, a space opens up. A space for a genuine, productive, internal dialogue.
And that dialogue is driven by two essential questions that immediately refocus you on the present moment, on integrity. The first is very immediate, very tactical.
What is asking for my attention in this moment?
That question just cuts through all the abstraction and the noise. It brings you out of theoretical strategy and into the tactical human reality right in front of you.
Is it an unresolved tension on the product team? Is it your own internal fatigue that's demanding a pause? Is it a tiny detail in a cash flow report that everyone else is missing?
It demands total non-judgmental presence. It recognizes that leadership success is really just a series of correctly attended to moments, not a big destination you arrive at.
By forcing your attention onto the right thing, right now, you ensure your limited energy is applied where it's most needed.
And the second question builds on that first one. It offers the necessary long-term cyclical context. It integrates those 6 recurring themes.
What season am I in, and how do I lead from here with integrity?
This question is profound because it fully accepts and validates the cyclical nature of growth. It acknowledges that sometimes the season requires deep resource gathering or internal restructuring.
A period of quiet development that looks like dangerous stagnation on a spreadsheet.
And other times, the season demands intense outward action, expansion, harvesting.
So if you recognize you're in a season of letting go, maybe shedding an old business unit or going through a painful cultural shift, leading with integrity means being honest about that, not pretending that endless, effortless growth is possible.
Exactly. And if you recognize you're cycling back through identity, maybe after a merger that completely changed your role, leading with integrity means pausing long enough to redefine your core purpose, even if it visibly slows things down for a bit.
Integrity isn't about hitting a fixed goal.
It's about aligning your action with the internal truth of your current reality. And that's why the question never expires. It's always relevant because the external world is always changing and our internal orientation has to constantly adjust to meet that reality with honesty.
And that honest adjustment requires the highest form of courage.
The courage to say, my current season is not the one my peers are celebrating. My work this quarter is quiet, internal, and foundational. And to lead from that deeply honest, non-comparative place anyway, that's what sustains influence.
And this shift, this embrace of the cycle, it is exactly what the complex demands of leadership beyond 2030 are going to require.
The world is only getting more complex, more ambiguous. The idea that you can rely on a fixed 5-year plan is rapidly becoming obsolete.
We're going to need leaders who can navigate constant disruptive flux, who are profoundly comfortable with ambiguity.
And who have the self-awareness to know when they need to cycle back to a fundamental question of meaning or identity, not from weakness, but out of necessity for systemic stability.
It demands the courage to stay in a continuous, open dialogue with ourselves and with a world that is defined by constant, unpredictable change.
The leader who tries to exert full control over that external flow will inevitably be broken by it. But the leader who attunes to the flow, who recognizes the season they are in, and leads with integrity from that honest place.
They will sustain their influence, their organization, and their own well-being. The cycle isn't a constraint. It's a profound and necessary source of renewal.
So if growth really is cyclical, and these same fundamental themes, identity meaning contribution, they keep returning, asking for, a deeper look, how does recognizing your current season fundamentally alter the definition of success for you in this moment?
What specific question from those recurring themes is knocking loudest for you right now, asking for your full, non-judgmental attention?